Hi, everyone. Welcome to Yoink Media. I'm your host, Audra. Yoink Media is all about storytelling to empower entrepreneurs. And tonight we are joined by two wonderful guests, Sophia Lopez of Kaleido and David Wasson of SymbaChain. They are going to be speaking at the South Carolina Resilience Blockchain Conference that is going to be kicking off virtually tomorrow morning. And so we're really excited to have them join us tonight and learn a little bit more about their companies. We've got Sophia joining us and David joining us right now. So say hello to the folks and give us a quick introduction of who you are.
Hi, I'm Sophia Lopez, founder and COO of Kaleido.
Hi, I'm David Wasson. I'm with SymbaChain, Director of Enterprise Business Development.
Wonderful. And we're going to do a couple of quick icebreakers just to get to know you all a little bit better. So if you could tell us what city you're joining us from tonight.
Guess I'll go again. I'm joining you or everyone from Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, fellow East Coaster, like it.
I am actually joining you tonight from Portland, Oregon.
All right.
Yeah.
And is that home for both of you, or you just happen to be there at the moment?
Currently living in Chapel Hill, which is part of the metro area here.
Awesome.
And I split my time between the Bay Area and Portland, and I think the last month and a half I've been riding out the pandemic in Portland. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, I am joining everyone from Charleston, South Carolina, where the Resilience Conference is going to be based tomorrow. And I'm curious, you mentioned, David, you were writing out quarantine. And I'm wondering if you could share with me, what is your go-to quarantine snack?
Oh, man. This is going to sound bizarre. I've been eating chocolate malted balls, those malted milk balls. I don't know. I'm addicted to them.
Yeah.
It's for real.
That doesn't sound strange. That sounds delicious. What about you, Sophia?
Yeah. I guess probably not a go-to snack, although I have returned to eating keto. And
Okay.
I'm also pescatarian, so I'm ketotarian. So when I think of a snack nowadays, it's like, well, fits in that envelope? But it's a surprising number of delicious food and snacks that can fit in there. But I did actually pick up some keto bars from one of these warehouse clubs the other day, and they're pretty good. I was surprised. So, but that probably is at the top of the list of the snacks. Because, protein bars start tasting all the same after a while. So it's like a miracle to taste something yet.
Yeah.
So, okay, they broke the mold here, but.
That's awesome. I have found that I'm cooking a lot more just because I'm home a lot more. And so I've been doing a lot of like scrambled eggs and just sort of whatever's in the refrigerator vegetable wise that gets thrown in the scrambled eggs. But it's been nice to be able to cook a little bit more. And David, I admit I've also been eating more candy than usual. So I can relate to both of those things.
Sugar buzz, I love it.
Yeah. And chocolate's a good go-to for me. So that's a solid choice. All right. So once travel is a little bit more fluid, what's the first place that you guys will travel to for fun? So not for a business trip, not anything utilitarian. If you were just going to take a trip for fun, Sophia, why don't you tell us first where you'd go?
Yeah, this is a little painful because I have a friend with a gorgeous villa that overlooks this ocean in Greece. And she's like, you can have the whole place in August. So I actually had tickets. And then, of course, the European Union's like, US can't travel there anymore. We were going to have sort of a family get together. So I still haven't been able to just like cancel the Delta tickets yet but obviously nothing's going to change between now and August. But I actually was looking, there are some places where you can travel if you wanted to, where it's very contained, like Mexico, for example. I used to live there for a number of years. They're letting people from the US travel to Cancun and the resorts. And you're just sort of, you hang out at the beach.
Right there.
Yeah, because they want to keep their industry. So there's actually some place you can go to Caribbean islands and other things like that. But I did go to the Outer Banks, sort of a self-isolated sort of way. It's pretty remote there. So there's little things you can do in the U.S.
Yeah. I just heard actually today about a gentleman who had been in the England area for work, but who was from Greece originally. And when COVID started, he couldn't get out quickly enough. So the flights were canceled. He found himself sort of pseudo trapped, and he literally got on his bike and rode his bike across England, Scotland, took a ferry over to Eastern Europe and rode his bike back to Greece. I think it took him 5 or 6 weeks. So I guess there's always alternatives if you really, really wanted to be in Greece.
I read a similar story in the last 2 months about someone who was separated from their fiance, and they biked all the way up to the Nordic countries, sort of
there you go,
that direction. So
sure. David, where would you go?
All right, well, that's a great question, actually, Audra. We're trying to plan some trips that we can drive to right now rather than fly. So we're relatively new to the Pacific Northwest. So we're thinking about driving down to this place called Crater Lake, which is actually a really beautiful. Yeah, and then the other one is, well, my partner, she's trying to convince me to go to Yellowstone, which is about a 10-hour drive from here. We've been to Yosemite, but never Yellowstone. I just don't know what Yellowstone's going to be like right now. It is open, but
sure.
But I visualize either really long lines of people that are 6 feet apart, or just out of control crowds. I don't know what to expect. So we're contemplating both those two things.
Gotcha. Yeah. I have some family that was based in McMinnville, Oregon, and I have been told that there is absolutely nothing compares to the color of blue in Crater Lake. I've heard it's just absolutely gorgeous. So yeah. I recommend that one. All right. Well, thanks for humoring me with a little bit of, sort of off the cuff questions there. We are going to spend some time with both David and Sophia over the next little while. And so we're going to put Sophia on the hot seat first. And so we're going to say goodbye to David for just a little while, and we'll see him in just a bit. Okay. But I wanted to give an opportunity to just sort of speak one-on-one to both of you and get a little bit more information about your backstory and what projects you're working on. So Sophia, if you would give me a little bit more detail about your background. And I've got sort of a fun fact to share with everyone. Whenever we bring guests on board for a live stream, we always ask them for a fun fact. And Sophia's is that she has some very interesting skills in the mechanical realm and can repair jet engines, right? Jets?
Yep.
Tell me, where did that come from? Tell me the background of that.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in New York City, and my parents were from a different country, so they really felt like, hey, when you go to high school, the four of us, you guys should get some skills. So I was one of the first women to attend this vocational school called Aviation High School. And I was in overalls and fixing. We had a hangar with airplanes. So I was just fixing these jets and smaller Cessnas and all range of planes. So there were 7 women in my class and like 700 guys, and there was 2,500 students in the school. So it was an interesting experience. We also had college prep classes. But at the end, we were eligible to sit for the FAA airframe and power plant licenses because of all the hours we worked. So I went ahead and took those and got all of those credentials. Now I did decide to pursue engineering. So I went to Harvard. I worked my way through college the whole time to support myself. And then just ended up worked with some startups in those early days, and always wanted to get back to the startup world and found my own company. So that's how I ended up doing that recently.
So that's what you're doing when you're not repairing jet engines. That's amazing. What did you say the school was called?
Aviation High School.
Aviation High School sounds like something that Disney Channel would make a series on.
Yeah, there are some New York high schools. What fame was LaGuardia High School, which was the arts and music. So there were specialized high schools in that school system that I guess are fodder for interesting stories.
That's awesome. Well, engineering sounds very applicable. Sounds like a really natural transition. And so you went to get an education in engineering from Harvard, not too shabby of a place to get an education. And then what were some of your first forays into the professional world once you finished up school?
Well, I already had been working because I was paying my own way through with work and scholarships. So I worked in some early tech startups. One of the companies I worked for actually still around today, and that was their first employee, and they did great, which is back then they didn't give equity out, unfortunately. But I actually went into consulting, and we had some interesting projects on sort of environmental, which used engineering, but also econometrics and sort of on the business side too. So good foundation for later in life. But then worked in and out of the US, worked in other countries as well, and then went back to get an MBA is how I landed in North Carolina. Worked with IBM for about 10 years after business school. And as part of that, owned these large portfolios, the P&L. I had a $3 billion P&L at one point on enterprise systems. Working with our biggest clients and really saw I had the growth areas of mobile analytics, cloud and security. And I saw blockchain was something that, as clients were on this decades old processes and systems, there was really going to be this once in a generation shift to the cloud and to new ways of working. And you could see this ecosystem economy forming around the world to sort of cross-industry borders dissolving, and the way people interact and the needs to see sort of real-time view of shared data was emerging. So it was very early in the blockchain space at IBM. I ended up being the executive owner of two business units that came together, the enterprise system side and the cloud, and launched the industry's first blockchain managed service. So worked with hundreds of clients in those early years of enterprise blockchain, and really saw there was a need for a solution that was a lot more than just running a blockchain node as a service. It was really a full stack of technologies so that these companies could collaborate together in new ways. And the tools and workflow for that just hadn't been built yet. So left to start Kaleido. And
that's a great transition to Kaleido. So tell us a little bit about when Kaleido was founded and what you were setting out to accomplish, because that's a great little lead in the extra services that you were seeing were needed.
Yeah. So we're approaching 3 years now. What we really saw the need was, and prior to owning this enterprise systems portfolio, I had worked in software and integration, middleware, transaction processing space. So there's just many layers to building an enterprise grade solution. And what we were seeing in the early years with blockchain is that people were spending a lot of money, a lot of time, thousands of lines of code just to basically rebuild like a plumbing layer, and they weren't able to prove the business value out of the main idea that they were trying to rally sort of companies and participants around. So we really founded Kaleido with the goal of accelerating the ability to get to the benefits of blockchain so that these companies, organizations, governments, society could get to those benefits. And we've spent the last two and a half years building out all those layers. So it's we're plug and play, just a digital transformation platform. So, blockchain stuff, the blockchain part of it is 5 to 10% of the solution. So we're software as a service. You can go on there, start using us for free. We have various tiers. You can move up as you go from proving out the concept and then doing a pilot with real data and maybe 5 or 6 companies. And then you could scale to production on that same platform. So we had, in the early days, one of my first projects at IBM was a trade finance network with some major banks based out of Singapore. Some of those early trade finance networks where they have exchanging letter of credit is one use case, were 5 years later still not in production, to just trying the old way of building this. And now on Kaleido, we actually, a trade finance network built on us. They have a third of the top 20 banks in the world, the oil majors, different inspection, certification companies, and a whole finance, basically, platform ecosystem. They were able to get into production in less than 6 months on Kaleido. And they've already transacted $1 billion in the last year. So I think the goal of accelerating the adoption of blockchain is something that's we're really passionate about, and it's really rewarding to see people getting those benefits.
Sure. So let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the things that we strive to do here at Yoink Media is to just be able to break down barriers for information sharing and helping people understand new technologies. And for whatever reason, blockchain, kind of like you said, that once in a generation shift is one of those things that just seems to mystify people and seem to be a little bit intimidating. People don't necessarily understand it or how it works or what the applications might be. And to your point, a lot of times it's not quite as useful for people to know exactly how something works on the technology end. You just need to put it in some sort of format or formulation so that they can make use of it. So, a lot of people these days, they don't know exactly how the internet works, but they're very thankful that it does. So you just need to give them tools and applications to be able to use the internet. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like that's one of the things that Kaleido is working to do. Could you tell me a little bit more, just to give people sort of another use case for like maybe a client? I know we were speaking earlier just about the supply chain world and how blockchain can be integrated into improving supply chain. For those that don't know, supply chain is one of those industries that is lagging, certainly, in terms of technological advancement. There's still a lot of phone calls and faxes being sent in supply chain world. And so, Sophia, maybe you could speak to that and maybe talk about if you're seeing clients come in and make use of your services on that end.
Sure. Yeah, supply chain is interesting. I mentioned the Trade Finance Network is one example that's live in production. And that one's really, in the financial services industry. So it's more of like a vertical area. And just for some context, they move from just phone calls from back office traders with these, the oil barrels and financing that to now like this digital platform where they have a real-time view of the data. And then they can move so much faster. So it's a lot of times in the enterprise space, it's just, better, faster, cheaper. So the evolution of how they're doing things. So they're really digitizing this process for the first time. And now with COVID, in that case, it's a great example. Mercer, which is a consulting company, did a survey. Only 2 out of 5 companies, these global companies they talked to before the pandemic said that they were actually, digital. So there's a lot of companies now looking at these back office processes where you had people in offices calling each other, faxing each other, like, well, we need to put this on a digital platform. By the way, we don't want to wait like 5 days for everyone. Like, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you not get it? And settling disputes, you want one common view of the data. So that's what we could do for you. And in the trade finance example.
So that's a huge waste of time and resources. And then you talked about data just now. Share with people a little bit about how blockchains are able to manage data and help people see just sort of the same view of data so that different data is not getting skewed across platforms.
Yeah. And I did want to circle back. And I think the supply chain is a good context for the data answer. Supply chain is a horizontal solution. So every single industry, you think about a value chain that's being produced. There's some sort of product or good that's moving through different stages that people need line of sight to. So if you look at even the biggest retailers, have trouble tracking shipments of things like toilet paper or PPE masks, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can look across all industries and you have data that's flowing, and you'd really say it's more like a supply chain, type of use case. And what you really run into is, people can't have trouble tracking and tracing. People of like, where is the item exactly? Then you have payments attached to it, and then there's risk associated if you're working with small and medium businesses that are transacting, and that all of this introduces a lot of friction. So I'd say, if you look at now having a shared view of the data that blockchain allows you, and having the transparency and trust, because people can't go back and change the data, so it's immutable. you're removing that friction so you're helping business really move much faster. You're helping avoid all the disputes. You're helping lower risks. So in supply chains now, you can actually, like, sometimes, you're lending money, or, you're transacting with certain people, that there's so much risk built in that the cost of transacting also goes up a lot. So it's removing a lot of the pain points and friction around these use cases where there's data that's shared to all of these parties, and there's a joint incentive to having clean data that's transparent and visible to everyone, but it's also secure. So.
Sure. So Sophia and I were talking earlier today, and she knows that I am a co-founder in a PPE procurement marketplace. And so she was talking about how Kaleido could be of assistance to us in terms of just verifying that PPE is legitimate and good quality and not counterfeit. And to your point, that's something that we could kind of put on the back burner because it just seems like a big leap for, accomplishing some new tech. And it sounds like you guys can get people rolling and setting up their blockchains in really quick amount of time. So you guys offer a couple of different options, a free option, and then some paid options as well, with I think some bells and whistles if they want some extra services. And so can you tell people just if people would be interested in going on and checking it out and trying to set up their own blockchain, what that would look like? And then if people are interested in getting in touch with you past that, they can certainly reach out beyond that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Audra. So we have a software as a service platforms. You can go on, and there's a free starter tier. There's also very, very low cost development tier, and then you move up into production level tiers. When you go on to the free starter tier, which is just Kaleido.io, you basically you can build your own blockchain in a matter of minutes. I don't know if you had a chance to try that yet. But you basically, we offer a lot of flexibility and choice. So different blockchain open source protocols, we're basically running and managing these open source protocols for you. So you don't need any specialized blockchain skills there. You can choose the consensus mechanism. So how do you come to agreement around putting transactions on the blockchain? So these are just sort of click button, simple choices you make. You set up your environment. You could decide to, invite other members or sort of run a blockchain, and you assign nodes to different members. You basically could be up and running, as I mentioned, in a matter of minutes, just on the main starter tier. And then we allow you to use some of the plug and play services. So you can say, hey, let's say with your PPE network, we want to collaborate around the shared data of who is sort of a vetted supplier. Like, we vetted a supplier. We want other PPE networks, maybe ones in Mexico and Europe we're working with, but we're all drawing from the same suppliers from Southeast Asia or China. And we can upload this document to like a data marketplace and share it with the other people who have the same goal as us, which is to protect our, healthcare professionals. And that way, we also can certify, we received the goods and they were the quality they had committed, and they can do the same as well. Like, they've used another supplier. So now we're getting this effect of sort of magnifying the fact that we're all vetting and doing some of this legwork, but we can all benefit and we move faster, which is our goal of like serving the healthcare providers who desperately need this equipment.
That's great.
None of us want to spend $1 million.
Sure.
On effective shit.
Really, really practical applications there. All right. Well, Sophia, thanks so much for filling us in a little bit more on Kaleido, and we're going to bring you back a little bit later and ask some more questions about that. So Sophia is going to drop backstage, and we're going to bring David on. And David's going to fill us in a little bit on his background and Symbachain.
Absolutely.
Hey there, David. Welcome back.
Thanks, Audra.
Absolutely. So, David's fun fact was that he tried to survive for a little over a year, if I understand correctly, using just cryptocurrency. So tell me a little bit about that adventure. How easy was it? How difficult was it? Were there certain things that were really fluid and certain things that were more difficult?
Yeah, it's a great experiment that we did. I actually have a friend who's really deep into crypto, and like he was in Occupy Wall Street, and he's kind of a cypherpunk really. So we had a bet. I joined a company called Nulls. It's actually an open source protocol, blockchain protocol, and when I worked there for a year and a half, they paid me only in cryptocurrency. So I thought, let me see if I can actually pay my bills with cryptocurrency, or at least how far I could get. And it worked pretty well. I mean, with the help of things like BitPay, which is a crypto debit card. But the one thing that I learned and kind of drove my partner crazy, is that we never knew what the price was going to be. I mean, in other words, we would get paid, and one week we were making a whole bunch of money, and then the next week we were losing a whole bunch of money. So it was really hard to manage, any kind of a budget around it. But it was amazing how just over that course of 1 year, how many more places around, at least where we live, started accepting Bitcoin or Ethereum or other payment types. So it was a fun experiment. I'd say we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah. Were you in a metropolitan area when you were trying that experiment?
Yeah, I was in the Bay Area.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That was probably helpful.
It was.
Yeah, have a little bit larger of a city.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thanks for sharing that with us. That's a fun story. And so if you would, same as Sophia, just give us a little bit of background, just sort of on your professional experience and what kind of led you to the place that you are now.
Right, absolutely. Thanks. So I have a business background. I have a business degree, and my first real position out of college was with Raytheon. I worked for Raytheon for about 7 years, had a really nice fast track career, stable in technology, mostly in enterprise sales. And I got lured away with the .com boom back in 2000, and went to work for a startup in Menlo Park, and also in enterprise sales, but really got my feet wet in what it means to start up a company, all the different hats you have to wear, and just really exposed me to that. And then what was great is I went through some of the funding processes and getting different series of funding. And then after that, we were actually acquired by Oracle, which was an experience in itself. After that, the way I got into blockchain is I was working for a company that had a technology that was to track and trace prescription drugs through the supply chain in the United States. And they were using serialization technology, which is basically your 3D barcodes. And there's some government mandates about the track and trace and provenance of prescription drugs because there's a lot of counterfeit. So this was an anti-counterfeit software and hardware solution. But as the evolution of that, and blockchain became more obvious as an awesome use case for supply chain, that started to take us into blockchain. And rather than just focusing on serialization for that solution, we moved into blockchain. So that's how I was introduced to it, was via supply chain.
Yeah, that's an amazing application. I know that there are other projects like Wabi that are using that tracking technology to make sure that things like the baby food on the grocery store shelf are legitimate and nothing's been tampered with and that sort of thing. And so that seems like a similar tracking incentive for things like the pharmaceutical industry, certainly.
Yeah, there's actually a bigger problem of counterfeit drugs in the U.S. than most people, including me, ever realized. So it is definitely a problem. From there, I moved. So then now I'm hooked on blockchain pretty much. So I was approached by a protocol. It's an open source platform called Nulls, and they're a Singapore-based platform. So they approached me to open up a U.S. operation. So I founded the Nulls Foundation in the United States, based in San Jose,
yep.
and built a team around that. And it's an open source protocol. It's very kind of, I would call it almost bleeding edge technology. It's moving fast, but it's very fast. It's actually a great experiment in terms of it's an open source project, and it's an open source and decentralized organization. There is no hierarchy. So it's just the community basically runs the project.
Yeah,
but
I actually I have some Nulls in my portfolio, so I'm somewhat familiar. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great project. It's just a very, very bleeding edge technology.
Yeah.
And then
And
then
so how did you convert that sort of experience into wanting to jump in and start a new project?
yeah, and that project, I mean, Nulls is doing well. It's just it was a little bit. I mean, it's really razor edge cutting, and it was for me in terms of stability. It was a great experience for me because I really learned what cryptocurrency and blockchain and decentralization meant more than just the technology, really in the organization sense. But for me, I wanted something a little bit more stable, something that's really geared towards wider adoption. So that's why I moved to SymbaChain, because SymbaChain, while it's great technology, it's being used, and it's a tool that can be used and is being used, and that's what I want to be a part of. Is really
Sure.
seeing adoption.
So tell us a little bit more about SymbaChain. It was originally birthed from a grant for a government project, and then sort of pivoted along after that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. And it was a DARPA grant back in late 2017 that was awarded to University of Notre Dame and to a manufacturing company in northern Indiana called Atamco. Atamco, they manufacture precision parts, mostly for the government, for the Department of Defense. So the mission of that was for Notre Dame and Atamco to come up with a secure messaging system for the United States Air Force to send signals and messages out to the deployed field with specifications for equipment, spare parts for equipment that would actually be 3D printed in the field. So that technology the blockchain was to secure the messaging, and then in the field it was actually using additive manufacturing or 3D printing in the field. So that project went really well, and that's how we got started. But Dr. Taylor, he's our CTO. He was one of the Notre Dame professors that was responsible for that first project. Realized in 2017 that it was very difficult to use blockchain. It was cumbersome. It was not user friendly. I mean, Dr. Taylor has a PhD in computer science, and it was even hard for him to figure out. So he set his team on a mission to simplify the ability to build apps and deploy them on blockchain. So he came up with a couple different tools. One is called Smart Contract Designer. And the idea is for us to remove that barrier of entry. There's a lot of things that we call, non-differentiating heavy lifting. Like you need to understand Solidity, which is a code language. You need to understand, how to run a wallet or what type of storage, IPFS. And there's all these different barriers to entry. And what Symba decided to do is to take that heavy lifting away and let the user focus on their business problem and their solution around that. So as a result of that, they've created Smart Contract Designer, and it's basically a drag and drop user interface that lets you define your assets and transactions in your business process and draw relationships between those. But what's really elegant about it is in the background, it's generating your code for your application. So you don't need.
Sorry, David, just for those who might not be as familiar with blockchain and the terminology, can you explain a little bit about what a smart contract is and how it would be used in an application?
Right, sure. So a smart contract, it is code that's written and would be part of your application. It's the basis for your application on a decentralized platform. But the smart contract, it's a self-executing set of rules. So if you had multiple contracts, if you wanted to purchase a car, you would have a smart contract that would have elements in there that needed to be satisfied. Like, does the person have money that's buying it? Does the person that's selling it actually own the car? Like, what's the VIN number? Things like that. And then once those criteria are automatically met, then the contract self-executes. So that it eliminates kind of that need for the middleman, the arbitrator. That's what the smart contract does. And that's one of the many benefits to blockchain. So that smart contract is what, by using the SymbaChain tool, you're designing a smart contract without even knowing any code. You're just focused on your business. But when you get done, basically, putting your flowcharts together for your business, you've got your code actually written. And it's really useful for proof of concepts. I mean, that's really what it's used for. But then beyond proof of concept, once you've established that it's a working app, we have a partnership with Microsoft Azure, so you can scale up into full production. We're also a Power App participant on Microsoft Azure. So
that's awesome. So can you give us an example? Sophia was able to talk to us a little bit about a client or two of hers. Could you share with us maybe one of your clients and how they're using that technology right now?
Yeah, sure. I will have to say that the first one's going to be a supply chain because I think we've identified supply chain is really ideal for blockchain, right? So
Sure.
one instance would be one of our customers is Dow Chemical, and they have a very long supply chain, very complex supply chain. And it's basically done manually. I mean, the track and trace, the provenance, basically if there's any disruption, it's all done manually in terms of notification. But they came to us, said, our team, the Dow team, their development team does not have a lot of capability in blockchain. They have some great developers, but really not a lot of experience with blockchain. We want to automate some of these manual processes in terms of the provenance of our supply chain. But we don't really have the capability. We don't have Solidity coders and other blockchain talent. So they use SymbaChain to create a portion of their supply chain on a blockchain, and it essentially has alerts if there's a disruption to the supply chain. Their procurement people and their supply chain management people are notified that there's a potential disruption to the supply chain. So that was Dow, and then we've got some other use cases in supply chain as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. It sounds like you are going to have people covered on the smart contract end, and Collidia is going to have people covered on the blockchain end. So a great symbiosis there. So we're going to bring Sophia back now, and I've got some questions for both of you. And I would say for anyone that's watching the live stream with us now, feel free on Facebook. We've got a comment section. So if you've got a question for either of our guests, feel free to drop it in the comment section, and we'll try to get it answered for you while we're here with these wonderful folks. So first question for the both of you is, how did you go about building a company and finding talent in such a new technology?
I guess I'll start. I think one thing just for managing very large product management sort of responsibilities and portfolios and teams in enterprise space is when you're building something new like this, we felt really strongly we needed to have a team where the engineers, designers, developers, product management, we were all together because it's, you need a lot of whiteboarding, move fast. So we were looking to hire locally in the Raleigh area, or people who would be willing to move here. And I think that was a really important decision we made early on. Culture is really important. You want people who are really bright, but it's very collaborative. When you're building, cloud software as a service, there's lots of these microservices, and they all need to weave together. So everyone needs to know what everyone else is working on. We move really quickly in 2-week sprints. So there's a lot of communication needed. So it's a marriage of sort of, really strong technical skills on the engineering side with the ability to communicate and collaborate, and then just really putting your ego aside, because people think like, this is my idea, I want to do it my way. I mean, you can come in, I think some of the West Coast companies like saying strong opinions loosely held. Like, so when you get new data, blockchain is just such a new space. You need to have that learner's mindset, the beginner's mindset, and you really care, you're passionate, but you're willing to just take new data and inputs and then, come together as a team to build what's right. So
Sure.
That's in a snapshot, the whole philosophy of how we hire.
Sure. David, what was your strategy with that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We, well, one thing that's been kind of good for us is that we were born out of academia, so we have, relationship with Notre Dame. So we kind of get some of the first draft picks out of Notre Dame, which is
not bad.
Yeah, it helps. But I think one of the things is that blockchain is a very abstract thing to understand. I mean, it's really hard to describe it verbally. It's hard to read about it. It's just, we really feel like the way to learn blockchain is to actually do it, to get that taste knowledge by doing those things you can't absorb in a classroom. So I think, one of the things we do is we bring on interns to work with our technology team. We've got a really strong development team, both in Indiana and actually over in Wales, UK. But yeah, we find those talent. There's a lot of people that have this burning desire to be in blockchain because they really think it is going to be the next. It's going to be the next internet, and so yeah, that's basically it.
So that's a great transition point, actually, to my next question, which would be, what are the biggest barriers that you see for blockchain companies like yours? Is it a general understanding of what blockchain is, resources to learn? What are you seeing there, David?
So I think the biggest barrier is not really on the resource side. I think the biggest barrier is adoption, and I think that's in business adoption. We're really focusing right now on education because we believe it all starts with education. And out of education, you're going to have future business leaders that understand blockchain and have an appreciation. It's demystified. It's easier to use where a business analyst can actually use it rather than an engineer. But I think in business, the adoption piece, there's a lot of pushback because even still in the media, it's this, this Bitcoin and Silk Road and all this, and there's a lot of pushback. So getting beyond that, stigma and showing the real value of blockchain and getting the adoption, that's what I think the biggest challenge is.
Awesome. What are your thoughts on that, Sophia?
I think anytime you have a newer emerging technology, what's really important actually are people like you, Audra, who look at what, telling the stories around that in a way that, everyone can understand. I think blockchain is really very interesting technology to come along compared to others in recent years and over the last decade, because there's interest in the C-suite, from the CEO down, the lines of business, people who own portions of the business and processes and how things are done today, and all the way down into the data center. And people can just completely geek out on, all the way, the development. So it's like, how do you have to speak to the right audience with the right message, and, what are the problems, the job that person's trying to get done, the problems they're facing. So I guess my advice for, people in the blockchain space is you need to be really clear with who your audience is, what the problem you're solving for them, how you can help them. Because otherwise, it can be really confusing. People
Sure.
Google and try to learn about blockchain, and they're getting, stuff for the crypto mixed in with what enterprise needs to hear. And then they end up, walking away even more confused than they started.
Right. Hashtag clear audience.
Yeah.
That actually brings us to a great lead-in for a question from one of our viewers. Thanks, Sally Halsey, for the question. Question for either or both of you. What are some of the biggest challenges for businesses trying to integrate blockchain?
Yeah, I'd say one challenge we saw, a half decade ago when we started with the enterprise blockchain sort of, early days, is that people just moving from a proof of concept to a pilot to then production. The proof of concept, the challenges at that level really are, your new open source programming languages, new frameworks, you have, all of the skills, trying to figure out how these decentralized systems work. So just getting the arm around the technology is often a challenge at that stage. Then when people move to a pilot and you have real data, you have 5 or 6, companies, they might be even competitors. So it's like a co-opetition environment. So it's not, now you're getting to certain levels of like questions around privacy and security, and then realizing they all are operating in a completely new way. Like in the past, they would do a project in their own company. Now they have one application and one set of shared data and business logic that they're sharing among 5 or 6 companies. So imagine how like a company's risk officer sees that, or the security officer. It's like a whole new way of working. David was talking about smart contracts, and one thing we've built into Kaleido is a smart contract governance, so you can track every transaction back to the exact version of that smart contract in your GitHub repo. Because there's, it can be even confusing. It's like, well, we have this automated contract running this process. And the lawyers are like, well, how can we prove who's transferring what to whom and that we actually authorize this? So you need to be able to go all the way into the code, the byte code, and then prove this is what the business network agreed to run. So there's sort of these governance questions, and then getting into production, we're ISO 27K, externally certified. So people say, well, I want the same levels of information security and governance and, SOC 2 certified that any enterprise system would meet. So, and then the scalability, the reliability, we've had 99.99 of uptime since we've launched. So those are things that are, very hard when businesses are trying to bring in a new technology, getting your arms around the tech, getting the business relationships and the governance right for the network, and then really scaling to enterprise grade production that meets the high level of regulatory compliance they need to meet, and then the levels of the service levels agreement or SLAs that their clients.
I'm sure that changes so much from industry to industry. David, what are your thoughts on some of the biggest challenges for businesses trying to integrate blockchain?
Yeah, I think all the things that Sophia said, but I think I'm on the front line with business enterprise every day, and I think some of the pushbacks, one is privacy, and Sophia just mentioned that, and we support Ethereum mainnet public, but we also support Quorum, recently just Binance Chain, and Hyperledger. But the idea of having a public chain and almost all information from a business enterprise, they just are really reluctant to put out on a public chain. So the privacy is an issue. I think the other thing is integration, just in itself, of integrating, creating oracles to integrate with ERP systems, CRM systems. I think that's a challenge that the businesses are trying to get their head around. And just finally is scalability. I mean, a lot of the platforms out there, there's a lot of new consensus mechanisms out there, like Hedera has a really clever one. And there's other ones that are getting around that scalability, speed, transactions, and latency issues. But I think that's something that I hear a lot from businesses about the scalability.
Yeah, scalability has always been a huge thing. So it's great that those things are being addressed on a bunch of different fronts. So we've got another question here from South Carolina Blockchain. So the whole organization wants to know this. How do you incentivize inter-organizational blockchain participants to join in, i.e. what is their value prop? David, ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to my point earlier, if we clarify, what sort of audience we're addressing. So I'm thinking about an enterprise blockchain use case where people have the high levels of privacy they're looking for, as an example. And Kaleido, we have 5 different ways to give you privacy. So we could, if you're, how do you incentivize those sorts of use cases? Those ones are not about people mining, and they're not about crypto. It's about a system of record, a back office legacy process that they need to digitize and automate. And now with COVID, we've seen, for example, in the insurance industry, what we've heard is a 10-year acceleration in those sorts of use cases. So how do you incentivize these insurers to join? They have to solve this problem of getting to the cloud, digitizing these processes, and there's a real business benefit to that. So the incentives are really business model incentives and just financial incentives. It's not, and that's at, the business relationships that exist today, you're moving to this new, decentralized digitally transformed process that's very different from incentives like in the crypto space or, miners or those sorts of incentives. So sort of the same sort of reasons, business engage in value chains and supply chains today, there's a, business incentive that through their interactions.
Sure. We touched on this a little bit previously. David, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how COVID-19 has impacted this market and how you've either needed to pivot in your own company or how you've seen some of your clients pivot in the midst of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question, and that's a good dovetail because the incentive question kind of relates to what I was going to talk about with COVID. We're actually working on a project. It's collaborating with Prism Group, which is they're a high-end consultancy that do a lot of economics around social behavior and things like that, and incentives. And we also have Microsoft on the team in Notre Dame, and it's a project around contact tracing. And while we think blockchain is really excellent for contact tracing, and there's some other people out there, other firms, that have solutions for that. There needs to be an incentive for it. Like the privacy issue, we're working on that, but there needs to be a social incentive to do it. And we're finding that we're adding that element of incentive to, why should I wear this bracelet out in public? Well, you can earn incentive points to redeem it for something else. So we're adding that element of incentivization to the, the contact tracing element. So it's one that's come up, and there's been some others.
Yeah, awesome. So we've touched on this a little bit as well in terms of supply chain, certainly being one. Can you all share with us what fields you see blockchain having the biggest impact in over the next 5 years or so, say?
Yeah, I think, really, there was a VC who famously said, software is going to eat the world. And you think about what we're talking about here. I mean, every business process is going to be transformed, with software. And if you think of the Mercer study, only 2 of 5 companies, every 2 out of 5 were actually digitized. So I think it's going to touch our lives. I mean, we have consumer and every single aspect. So on the supply chain side, I know you and I, Audra, were talking about earlier today, one of our clients, consortiums or networks, they have 80% of the world's supply chain around grain. So it's, it's Cargill, it's Archer Daniel Midland, it's Bunge, it's Louis Dreyfus, it's Glencore. And, there are a lot of inefficiencies in how we just put food on people's tables, right? So being able to remove those inefficiencies, and this is an industry, I guess, back to the previous question, what was the incentive? They said, for over a decade, they've been trying to figure out how to create this ecosystem where they could work together, have the right levels of sort of privacy and trust and enterprise resiliency so they could actually improve the way they deliver, grains to the world. So I think as we're tackling some of our biggest problems in human history, on the back of COVID, it's really great. We have this toolkit and these technologies that have sort of matured and come to the point where we can help the world move to the next step and sort of solve these problems together.
Wonderful. And David, what are your thoughts? There's some fields that stick out in your mind in terms of application over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think, yes, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is digital identification or decentralized identification is becoming more and more apparent, an apparent need. Also, authentication. We're working on with some. There's a lot of social media out there right now that's going on, and we're working with one firm that's actually it's actually a government that is issuing social media, and they're worried about social media being misrepresented through deep fakes, and we're using blockchain to authenticate those videos so that they can come back and say no, that was a fraudulent video that was released. So I think there's a lot of that going on in terms of identification. Also, because the economy and things are kind of changing the way we don't go out so much anymore. We're seeing a lot of interest in live streaming and being able to create unique tickets to different events that might be online. So we've had quite a few inquiries about that type of thing as well. So
live streaming, tell me about that.
Yeah, like taking Broadway plays, and rather than having them on Broadway, they're live streaming them to people that want to actually pay for a ticket, maybe have a watch party with a celebrity.
Sure. So. I'm just ribbing you a little bit. I'm giving you a little bit of a hard time since we're on a live stream right now. So final question for you both. What advice would you give somebody who's interested in learning more about blockchain and maybe different business applications? Where would you suggest that somebody start?
Sophia?
Yeah, I guess it depends what their orientation is. If they're technical or more on the business side, I think if they were on the business side, I would recommend they start really learning about the transition to platform economies, which has been happening over the last 10 years, and then really thinking about what multi-sided marketplace looks like, the different business model incentives, because I think we need the people who can think about not just evolving business processes, but really sort of not just an evolution, but the revolution of, when you mentioned the internet earlier, Audra, who would have imagined at the very early days of the internet that like Uber would pop out or Airbnb. So we need some of those sort of futurists and the people who are the economists thinking through some of that. think if you're a developer just coming out of school, I mean, get your hands on the open source code. These communities are evolving really quickly. There's a lot of great education online and sort of blockchain academies. Use a tool like, our free tier on Kaleido. You can build your own networks and just start building stuff. So there's probably a whole range of things in the middle for like a business owner. Gartner, you may ask about use cases. I think Gartner had 3,000 use cases identified in the early years of blockchain. There are just so many. I know David and I mentioned a handful. There's thousands of ways. So find an area you're really passionate about changing, and then use this as one of the ingredients for these digital transformations that need to happen in the coming years.
David, what are your thoughts?
I echo all of those, and I think I really, especially about the education. I mean, whether you're going to take a university class or not, which is becoming really prevalent in universities, is blockchain courses. But there's also these academies that you can get a certificate in and understand the basics of what blockchain is. But also, I personally, when I started getting passionate about blockchain, I started going to meetups. I attend a lot of meetups. There's a lot of professionals that are trying to understand it from a business perspective and a computer science perspective. A lot of questions, all questions are kind of welcome at those meetups. And then by doing it, if Kaleido has a way for you to go and simply use it, their solution, same with Symbo, we have a solution. You can go to our website and do, build your first app and just walk through that screenshot by screenshot. So when you see it, you really it puts it in perspective.
Something about actually getting your hands on it and doing it.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot easier to really retain. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for both of your times. For the folks who have tuned in tonight and are interested and have had their interest piqued in blockchain and what our two lovely guests have been speaking about tonight, there is going to be a virtual blockchain conference all day tomorrow called Resilience SC. And it is sponsored by South Carolina Blockchain. And both Sophia and David are going to be presenting tomorrow. Sophia, what time do you present tomorrow?
3:30 Eastern.
Okay. And David?
Yep, 4:30 Eastern.
Perfect. One right after another. So the conference starts at 9 a.m. Because of some wonderful sponsorships, the conference is completely free of charge, this virtual version that they're doing. So if you just go to southcarolinablockchain.com, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page there, and they've got a link for you. There's an Eventbrite. They ask you to just sign up so that they can shoot you over a link. Forgive me, I misspoke, southcarolinablockchain.org, not .com. So southcarolinablockchain.org. And you can find out more information about the conference there. So we certainly encourage all of our viewers to tune in for as much of that as they possibly can tomorrow. And we appreciate both David and Sophia joining us. If you'd like to reach out or contact either one of them, you can reach Sophia at her LinkedIn, and you can reach David at his Telegram channel. So the last thing that we're going to do to wrap up tonight is we're just going to play a quick little lightning round. We've covered a lot of really pretty heavy dives into tech and use case and all of those things. And so we're just going to have a little bit of fun to close out the hour. So I'll just fire away questions. We're going to go clockwise. So David, I'm going to put you on the hot seat first. You're going to be the first to answer, then Sophia, and then I'll answer my own question because I like to be a sport. All right, so here we go. Is the lightning round. Apple or Android?
Apple.
Apple.
Apple. 3 apples. All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek for sure.
Star Wars.
I would be very in trouble with my father and his legacy if I didn't say Star Trek. So I got to go that direction. What is the favorite app that you have that you're using at the moment?
Oh, wow. Probably Blockfolio.
What about you, Sophia?
guess I use a lot of apps for work, and I work around the clock, so they would be in the top. But guess socially, there's.
It's the lightning round, Sophia.
I know. I guess I don't have like a favorite app, so I have to pass on that one.
Okay, I've never had a pass in the lightning round. That's very bold of you. I'm going to go with probably Slack for business and maybe Marco Polo for fun right now. All right, David, favorite flavor of wings?
Oh, buffalo, hot buffalo.
Hot buffalo. Sophia?
Buffalo wings used to be my favorite. Yeah.
Okay, different diet now. I'm going to go teriyaki for mine. Moving on to a furry kind of animal instead of a winged one, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Dogs.
All right, 3 dog people, though I love cats. All right, final question of the lightning round. What is the aspect of the blockchain conference tomorrow that you're most looking forward to?
I'm most looking forward to explaining to some of the participants in the Entrepreneur Championship how to create smart contracts and applications in an easy way. Yeah.
What about you, Sophia?
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to the entrepreneurial challenge they're launching with the students. And I think overall, what I love about this event tomorrow is just really thinking local for South Carolina, looking at making all those connections, and even bringing in some of the, the aspects of what's good for the state and the state's economy. Very forward-looking way of like bringing the whole South Carolina sort of ecosystem and community together. So I love that angle to it.
Awesome. Well, that's a great lead in to actually our live stream tomorrow. So tomorrow night, Yoink Media will be presenting a live stream with 2 guests that are going to be talking about the Entrepreneurship Challenge and also what the University of South Carolina is looking into in terms of possible curriculum. So we'll look forward to having Gordon Jones and Dirk Brown on in that regard. And I just want to thank both of you again for joining us this evening on our live stream. And so we're going to say goodbye to you now, but we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the conference. All right, and to our audience, thanks so much for joining us. Again, I'm Audra with Yoink Media. You can check us out at yoinkmedia.com. You can follow us there. We've also got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts that you can follow us on so that you never miss a broadcast. And please come back and join us tomorrow night. Like I said, we will be doing a wrap event once the South Carolina Resilience Blockchain Conference wraps tomorrow evening. Until then, have a great evening. And this is Audra signing off.